I survived 400 days in a hellhole overseas, keeping myself alive with just one memory. My wife's smile when I walked through the front door. But when I finally put my key in the lock, it didn't turn. It didn't even fit. Then I looked through the window and saw a man in a deputy's uniform drinking from my coffee mug, his hand resting on my wife's knee. I didn't know it yet, but the war wasn't over. It was just starting in my own living room. Hit like, subscribe for more stories, and comment your city or country. The rain in Seattle feels different when you haven't felt it in 2 years. It soaks right through you, like it's trying to freeze your bones. I stood on the porch of the house I had paid for with blood money, deployment bonuses, hazard pay, nights spent shivering in the desert. My duffel bag was heavy on my shoulder, but my heart was pounding so hard it felt light, fluttering with a mix of nerves and excitement. I was home a month early. Surprise. I wiped the rain from my eyes and tried the key again. Nothing. I jiggled it, thinking maybe the damp would have swollen the frame. But then the porch light flicked on, blinding me for a second. The door didn't open. Instead, the curtain on the bay window shifted. I saw them. Lila was laughing. She had her head thrown back, her neck exposed in that way that used to make me feel like the only man on earth. But she wasn't laughing at a joke I made. She was laughing at him. He was big, thick neck, buzz cut, wearing a beige deputy's uniform with the sleeves rolled up. Victor. I recognized him. He was the guy who used to ticket cars for expired tags downtown. The guy who always walked like he owned the sidewalk. Now, he looked like he owned my house. I didn't knock. I pounded. My fist hit the wood so hard the glass pane rattled. Lila, open the door. I shouted, my voice cracking. I hadn't spoken much English in months, just commands and radio checks. It felt raw in my throat. The laughter inside stopped dead. Victor stood up. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. He adjusted his belt, his gun belt, and walked to the door. He threw it open, blocking the view of my wife. You got a death wish, pal? Victor growled. He looked me up and down. I knew what he saw. I hadn't showered in 3 days. My beard was wild. My field jacket was stained with grease and red clay, and my eyes were sunken from jet lag. I didn't look like Sergeant Hunter. I looked like a drifter. Get out of my way, I said, stepping forward. Where is my wife? Victor shoved me back. His hand was heavy, firm against my chest. Your wife? Buddy, the only thing you have is about 5 seconds to get off this property before I arrest you for trespassing. Hunter. The voice was quiet, coming from behind Victor's massive shoulder. Lila stepped into the hallway. She was wearing a silk robe. I bought her that robe for our anniversary. Lila. I breathed out, the relief washing over me. Tell this idiot who I am. Tell him I'm your husband. I waited for the shock. I waited for her to scream, to run into my arms, to push the cop away. Lila looked at me. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't look happy. She looked disgusted. She scanned my dirty boots, my matted hair. She wrinkled her nose. Victor, she said, her voice cold as ice. I told you about the homeless guys in the woods. This one is aggressive. Just get rid of him. My knees almost buckled. The world tilted sideways. Lila, it's me. It's Hunter. She looked right at me, dead in the eye. Hunter is gone, she said flatly. Hunter wouldn't show up looking like a piece of trash. Close the door, Victor. You're letting the cold in. She turned her back. She walked away. She walked back into the warm light of the living room and sat down on the couch. I stood there, frozen. My brain couldn't process the data. It was a glitch. This wasn't real. Victor stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him, so it was just the two of us in the rain. He rested his hand on the grip of his service pistol. A casual threat. You heard the lady, Victor smirked. She doesn't know you. And frankly, you smell like a wet dog. So here's how this works. You turn around, you walk down that driveway, and you keep walking until you cross the county line. If I see you in this town again, I won't just arrest you. I'll make sure you disappear for good. I own this house. I whispered, my hands curling into fists. I could drop him. I knew 14 ways to disable a man his size before he could unsnap that holster. The training kicked in, adrenaline flooding my veins. Strike the throat. Kick the knee. Disarm. Victor saw the shift in my eyes. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of whiskey, my whiskey. Look at you. He laughed, poking my chest. You're a ghost. Nobody cares about a ghost. Now walk away, hero, before I put you down like a stray. I looked at the window one last time. Lila was pouring wine into 2 glasses. She looked peaceful. I wasn't a husband anymore. I wasn't a homeowner. In the span of 5 minutes, I had become exactly what they said I was. A homeless threat. I turned around. The rain was heavier now. I walked down the driveway, my boots heavy with mud. I didn't fight. Not yet. You don't engage the enemy when you're ambushed in the open. You retreat. You regroup. You find a vantage point. I walked until I reached the tree lean at the edge of the property. I didn't leave. I dropped my duffel bag in the wet leaves and sat down in the darkness, watching the lights of my own house. Victor was right about one thing. I was a ghost. And ghosts are very good at haunting people. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the wet leaves, watching the shadows move across the curtains of my own living room. Every time a silhouette passed the window, my stomach twisted. I imagined them eating the dinner I should have been eating, sleeping in the sheets I had bought. By the time the sun started to bleed gray light through the pine trees, the cold had settled deep into my joints. I couldn't stay in the woods. I needed money. I needed a lawyer. I needed to prove I was still alive. I hiked the remaining 2 miles into town. It was a small town, the kind where everyone knows your truck but pretends not to know your secrets. I kept my head down, pulling the collar of my field jacket up. I caught my reflection in a shop window and flinched. Victor was right. I looked deranged. Mud streaked my face, and my eyes were bloodshot and wild. I waited outside the First National Bank until the doors unlocked at 9. I was the first one in. The air conditioning hit me like a slap, smelling of carpet cleaner and stale coffee. I walked up to the counter. Clara, a woman who had been a teller there since I was in high school, looked up. She smiled automatically, then stopped. Her face went pale. She pulled her hand back from the counter like I was contagious. "Can I help you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. She didn't recognize me. Or maybe she did, and that scared her more. "It's me, Clara. Hunter," I said, my voice rasping. "I need to make a withdrawal from the joint savings account. All of it." Clara blinked. She looked at her computer screen, then back at me. She started typing, her fingers shaking slightly. "Hunter? But," Mrs. Lila said. She said what? I leaned in, pressing my dirty palms on the polished marble. "She said you were missing in action, presumed dead." Clara lowered her voice, glancing nervously at the manager's office. "The account was closed 3 weeks ago, Hunter. The life insurance payout was processed. The joint assets were transferred to her sole ownership." The room spun. I gripped the counter to keep from falling. "She cashed me out." I hissed. "I'm standing right here, Clara. I'm alive. I can't do anything." Clara stammered, backing away. "The system says you're deceased. You need to leave. Please. You're making people nervous." I looked around. The security guard, an old guy named Mason, was reaching for his radio. I didn't have my ID. It was in my stolen life, locked inside that house. I was a ghost with zero balance. I turned and walked out before Mason could grab me. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow dread. Lila hadn't just cheated on me. She had erased me. She had planned this. I wandered down Main Street, feeling invisible. My stomach cramped with hunger, but I had nothing. Then I saw it. Parked in the alley behind the hardware store, half covered in a blue tarp, was my 1978 Ford truck. My dad's truck. I had restored it bolt by bolt before I deployed. It wasn't at the house. Lila must have dumped it here like trash. I ran to it, ripping the tarp off. The tires were flat, and the windshield was cracked, but it was mine. I tried the door. Locked. I used a trick I learned in basic training with a piece of wire from a nearby fence and popped the lock. I climbed inside. The smell of old leather and motor oil wrapped around me. It was the first familiar thing I had felt in days. I curled up on the bench seat, locking the doors. I just needed an hour. Just 1 hour of sleep, and then I would figure out how to fight them. I closed my eyes, clutching the steering wheel like a lifeline. I didn't get an hour. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of a nightstick hitting the glass woke me up. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sat up, squinting into the blinding sun. A face was pressed against the window. Victor. He was grinning. "Rise and shine, hero," he shouted, his voice muffled by the glass. I didn't open the door. Victor didn't wait. He smashed the driver's side window with the butt of his baton. The glass shattered inward, spraying over my lap. He reached in, grabbed my collar, and hauled me out onto the asphalt. I hit the ground hard, scraping my cheek. I tried to stand, but a knee drove into my back, pinning me down. "You have the right to remain silent," Victor laughed, twisting my arm behind me until I felt the shoulder pop. "Although, nobody's listening anyway. This is my truck." I spat, dirt filling my mouth. "You can't arrest me for sleeping in my own truck." "This vehicle is abandoned property," Victor said, leaning close to my ear as he ratcheted the handcuffs tight, too tight. "And you? You're loitering. Vagrancy. Resisting arrest. I can keep adding to the list, Hunter. I've got all day." He yanked me up. I saw a tow truck backing into the alley. The driver hooked the chains to my Ford's bumper. "No." I surged forward, but Victor kicked the back of my leg, dropping me to my knees again. "Watch it go," Victor whispered. "That's the last piece of you leaving this town." I watched as they dragged my truck away, the tires screeching against the pavement. People were walking by on the main street, shoppers, families. They stopped to look. They didn't see a soldier who had been betrayed. They saw a dirty, violent drifter being taken down by a brave officer of the law. Victor shoved me toward his patrol car. He didn't put me in the back immediately. He paused, leaning against the door, looking at me with mock pity. "Lila was worried you'd come looking for this heap," he said casually. "She said you love this truck more than her. Guess she was right. Shame it's going to the impound crusher." "I'm going to end you," I said quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Victor laughed. He shoved my head down and threw me into the back seat. The cage was cramped, smelling of vomit and disinfectant. As we drove past the bank, past the diner, past the life I used to have, I realized the truth. I couldn't fight him as Hunter the soldier. Hunter the soldier was dead. If I wanted to survive this, I had to become something else. The holding cell at the county precinct was nothing like the military brigs I was used to. It was a 10 by 10 concrete box that smelled of bleach and despair. They had taken my belt, my shoelaces, and my watch, the watch my father gave me before I enlisted. I sat on the metal bench, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor, my mind racing through scenarios. They had my truck. They had my identity. And now, they had me in a cage where no one could hear me scream. The heavy steel door at the end of the corridor clanked open. Voices echoed down the hall, loud, booming, comfortable voices. One of them was Victor. I stood up and moved to the bars, pressing myself against the cold metal to listen. "Easy pickings, Sheriff," Victor was saying. "Guy's a total burnout. Saw him sleeping in the alley behind the hardware store. Truck was full of trash. Probably on drugs." Another voice, deeper and older, grunted. "You run his prints." "Ran him through the state database," Victor replied. "Too quickly. Came back with a mismatch error. System glitch. But Lila confirmed it's him. Said he's been off his meds for months. That's why she kicked him out." I gripped the bars so hard my knuckles turned white. Lila. She wasn't just playing along with this. She was scripting it. Off my meds. I had passed every psych evaluation with perfect scores. I was a field operator. Well, the sheriff's side. If he's a danger to himself, we can hold him for 48 hours. After that, we dump him at the shelter in the next county. I don't want vets clogging up my jail. Looks bad for the election. "Don't worry," Victor chuckled. "I'll handle the transfer personally. Make sure he doesn't find his way back." The voices faded as they walked into the dispatch office. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This wasn't just a bad breakup. This was a systematic dismantling of my life. Lila had set the narrative. I was unstable, dangerous, and disposable. And Victor was the hero protecting the town from me. I sat back down, the rage cooling into something sharper. Calculation. If I screamed, I was crazy. If I fought, I was violent. If I tried to explain my classified service record, I sounded delusional. I needed a different angle. 3 hours later, a young officer walked by, a rookie, barely 20. He looked nervous, holding a clipboard. He stopped at my cell. "Name?" he asked, not making eye contact. "Hunter," I said calmly. "But your deputy has me listed as John Doe, doesn't he?" The rookie looked up, surprised. "Oh yeah? No ID on person. Check the VIN number on the truck he towed," I said softly. "It's registered to Hunter, last name. You'll find the registration in the glove box. Unless Deputy Victor removed it." The kid frowned. Deputy Victor handled the intake. He said the truck was empty. "There's a loose floor mat on the passenger side." I lied smoothly. "Underneath it, there's a spare key and a laminated card with my service number. If you find that card, you have to log it. It's federal property. If it goes missing, that's a felony for whoever processed the vehicle." The rookie hesitated. He looked down the hall where Victor had gone, then back at me. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't raving. I was speaking with the quiet authority of a man who had led squads into fire. I'll check the impound log," the kid muttered, turning away. It was a small seed, but it was planted. Night fell. The station grew quiet. I closed my eyes and forced myself to sleep, just for a few hours. I needed the energy. When I woke up, the cell door buzzed. It wasn't the rookie. It was Victor. He wasn't smiling this time. He was holding a paper bag with my personal effects, what little I had. "You got a big mouth," Victor hissed, unlocking the gate. "Talking to my rookies? Trying to get smart." He threw the bag at my chest. "Sheriff says cut you loose," Victor spat. "Overcrowding. But don't think you won. You walk out those doors, and you keep walking. If I see you within 5 miles of Lila's house, I won't arrest you. I'll put a bullet in you and plant a knife in your hand." I took the bag. I didn't flinch. "Where's my truck?" I asked. "Civil asset forfeiture." Victor grinned, the arrogance returning. "Proceeds of suspected drug activity. It's being auctioned off next month. Lila's already signed the release." I walked past him. I could smell the fear on him now. He was rushing me out because the rookie had asked questions. He was sloppy. I stepped out into the cool night air. The town was asleep. I had no truck, no money, and no home. But I had something better. I had confirmation. Victor was scared, and Lila was greedy. I walked 2 blocks to the public library, huddled in the entryway to stay out of the wind. I wasn't leaving. I was going underground. If they wanted a homeless vet, I'd give them the best damn ghost they'd ever seen. I pulled my collar up. The surveillance started now. For the next 3 weeks, I ceased to exist. I stopped shaving. I rubbed dirt into the elbows of my jacket until it looked like a second skin. I learned which dumpsters behind the grocery store had the day-old bread and which alleyways stayed dry when the rain came down. To the people of this town, I was just another shadow they stepped around on their way to coffee shops. But shadows see everything. I set up a camp in the dense woods bordering the north side of my property, Lila's property now. I built a hide site, invisible from 10 feet away, just like I'd done in the mountains of Kandahar. From there, I had a direct line of sight into the master bedroom window. I watched. I saw Victor come and go at odd hours, always in his patrol car. He never brought groceries. He brought large, manila envelopes. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he'd hand one to Lila on the back porch. She didn't open them with joy. She opened them with nervous, shaking hands, counting thick stacks of cash before hiding them in the hollow fake rock by the garden hose. It wasn't just his salary, and it wasn't just my savings. This was something bigger. On a rainy Tuesday, I made my move. Victor had left for his shift. Lila drove off in her new SUV, purchased, no doubt, with the life insurance payout from my death. I slipped out of the woods. I didn't go to the house. Too risky. Victor would have cameras now. Instead, I went to the detached garage. I knew the keypad code, 0-7-0-4. My birthday. I prayed she hadn't changed it. I punched the numbers. The light blinked red. Denied. She had changed it. I circled around to the side window. It was painted shut, but the wood was rotten. I wedged my knife into the frame and pried. With a dull crack, it gave way. I slid inside, dropping onto the concrete floor. The garage was full of boxes labeled hunter's junk. My books, my uniforms, my tools. All boxed up and shoved into the corner to rot. But I wasn't looking for sentimental items. I was looking for the safe hidden under the workbench. I crawled under the table. The floor safe was still there, covered by a dusty tarp. I spun the dial. Right to 30. Left to 15. Right to 8. Click. The heavy door swung open. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Inside, there was no cash. No jewelry. Just a single ledger and a stack of letters. I opened the ledger. It was a list of names, dates, dollar amounts. Next to each name was a status: deceased, missing, unclaimed. I recognized the names: Simmons, Rodriguez, Kowalski, men I had served with, men who had died in combat or accidents back home, men whose families were supposed to be receiving benefits. My stomach dropped. Victor wasn't just stealing from me. He was intercepting death benefits. He was using his police access to flag accounts as unclaimed or redirecting the checks to shell accounts. And Lila was the bookkeeper. I grabbed the stack of letters. They were denial letters from the VA to widows, claiming insufficient documentation. Victor had been intercepting their mail. I heard a car door slam outside. Panic spiked in my chest. I shoved the ledger and letters into my jacket. I scrambled out the window just as the garage door began to rumble open. I hit the wet grass and rolled into the bushes, holding my breath. Victor's patrol car pulled in. He stepped out, talking on his phone. "Yeah, the gala is Saturday," he was saying, laughing. "We'll move the rest of the cash then. It's a charity event, right? Who's gonna audit a charity for veterans?" He walked into the house. I lay in the mud, my heart pounding a rhythm against the stolen evidence in my chest. I had them. I had the proof. But I couldn't take this to the local police. They were Victor's drinking buddies. I couldn't take it to the sheriff. He was too busy worrying about his re-election to look closely at his star deputy. I needed the nuclear option. I waited until dark, then hiked 5 miles to the truck stop on the highway. There was a payphone near the restrooms, one of the last ones left in the state. I fed quarters into the slot. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 4 years. It was a blind line, routed through 3 different switchboards before it rang on a desk in a windowless room in Arlington, Virginia. It rang once, twice. "Operations," a clipped voice answered. No name, no greeting. "This is Sierra 21 Actual," I said, my voice steady. "Authentication code, Echo Whiskey 99. Silence. Then the sound of typing. "Status?" the voice asked, sharper this time. "Active," I said. "I am not deceased. I am in hostile territory. I have intel on a domestic cell exploiting Gold Star families. The ringleader is local law enforcement. I have the ledger. Location: Washington State. Sector 4. I need extraction, and I need a heavy cleaner. The target is deeply entrenched." "Stand by," the voice said. "Extraction is not viable. We need you to secure the target until an asset can arrive. Can you hold?" "I can hold," I said, looking at my reflection in the graffitied glass of the booth. I looked like a monster. "Good. Monsters are scary." "Who is the target?" the voice asked. "Deputy Victor and civilian accomplice Lila," I said. "They're hosting a party on Saturday. The Veterans Support Ball." "Understood. The asset will be there. Do not engage until you see the signal." "What's the signal?" "You'll know it when you see the stars," the voice said. Click. The line went dead. I hung up the phone. Saturday. 3 days away. I had 3 days to stay alive, 3 days to keep the evidence safe, and 3 days to prepare for the performance of a lifetime. I walked back into the night. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was hunting. Saturday arrived with a steel gray sky that threatened snow. The entire town was buzzing. Banners hung across Main Street. 4th Annual Veterans Support Ball, hosted by Deputy Victor and Lila. It made me sick to look at them. They were using the very people they were robbing as props for their vanity. I spent the morning preparing. I went back to the spot in the woods where I had buried my go bag before I deployed, just a watertight canister with emergency supplies I hoped I'd never need. I dug it up with my bare hands. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was my dress blues uniform. It smelled of mothballs and old memories. I shook it out. It was wrinkled, and the gold buttons were dull, but it was whole. I stripped off my filthy layers, the flannel shirt, the torn jeans that smelled of campfire smoke. I washed myself in the freezing creek water, scrubbing the grime from my skin until it was raw and red. I put on the uniform. The trousers were loose around my waist. I had lost weight living on scraps. The jacket felt heavy, the fabric stiff. I pinned my medals on. The Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the commendations for valor that Lila used to say were just pieces of metal. I looked at my reflection in the creek. I didn't look like a soldier on parade. With my overgrown beard and gaunt face, I looked like a ghost wearing a stolen uniform. Perfect. I waited until nightfall. The gala was being held at the Grand Hotel Ballroom downtown. I could see the limousines pulling up, the flash of cameras. Victor would be there, shaking hands, soaking up the adoration. Lila would be on his arm, wearing a dress bought with money meant for grieving widows. I walked out of the woods. I didn't take the back alleys this time. I walked right down the center of the road. Cars slowed down as they passed me. People stared. A man in a tuxedo honked his horn. "Get off the road, bum," he yelled. I didn't flinch. I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, my boots striking the asphalt with a rhythmic thud. Left, right, left. I reached the hotel entrance. The valet looked at me with wide eyes, dropping the keys he was holding. The doorman, a big guy named Tiny, stepped in front of me. "Whoa, buddy," Tiny said, holding up a hand. "You can't go in there. This is a private event. Tickets only." I looked at him. "I'm here for the veterans," I said, my voice gravelly but steady. "Isn't this for them?" Tiny hesitated. He looked at my medals. He knew what they meant. He looked at my face, and I saw a recognition flicker in his eyes. He remembered me from before. "Hunter," he whispered. "Man, everyone said you were dead." I finished. "Not yet." Tiny stepped aside. He opened the heavy glass door for me. "Good luck, man," he muttered. I walked into the lobby. The noise of the party spilled out from the ballroom. Clinking glasses, laughter, a jazz band playing something upbeat. It sounded like a celebration. It sounded like a lie. I pushed open the double doors to the ballroom. The room was packed. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Round tables were covered in white linens and expensive centerpieces. At the front of the room, on a raised stage, stood Victor. He was holding a microphone, beaming. Lila stood next to him in a shimmering red gown, clutching a giant novelty check made out to Veterans Relief Fund. "And that is why," Victor was saying, his voice booming through the speakers, "we must always honor those who serve. We protect them, just as they protected us." The crowd erupted in applause. I started walking down the center aisle. At first, no one noticed. Then, a woman at a back table gasped. A man pointed. The applause faltered, dying out in ripples as heads turned. The silence spread like a wave until the only sound in the room was the heavy clomp, clomp, clomp of my combat boots on the parquet floor. Victor stopped smiling. He squinted against the stage lights. When he saw me, his face went slack. The microphone dipped in his hand. Lila froze. She dropped the corner of the giant check. It flopped over, revealing the blank white back. I didn't stop until I was 10 feet from the stage. I stood there, a specter in wrinkled blue wool, smelling of the woods and cold anger. "You forgot someone," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the dead silence, it carried to the back of the room. Victor recovered first. He let out a nervous laugh. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered into the mic, "it seems we have a local situation. Just a confused individual." Security? 2 hired guards started moving toward me. I didn't look at them. I locked eyes with Lila. Tell them, I said. Tell them where the money really came from, Lila. Tell them about the ledger in the safe. Lila's face crumbled. She took a step back, terrified. Victor's eyes went cold. He jumped down from the stage, landing in front of me. He clicked his radio off. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, he whispered, close enough that only I could hear. I'm going to bury you for this. Tonight. He reached out and shoved me hard. Get out of here, you drunk. You're disgracing the uniform. He grabbed the lapel of my jacket, right over my Purple Heart, and yanked. The fabric tore. A button popped off and skittered across the floor. Look at him, Victor shouted to the crowd, playing the victim. Stole a uniform to crash a charity event. Have you no shame? He raised his hand to strike me. He wanted me to fight back. He wanted a reason to put me down in front of everyone. I didn't move. I stood at attention. I looked past him, toward the main entrance behind the crowd. The doors swung open with a crash that shook the walls. Attention on deck. A voice roared, a voice that sounded like grinding granite. The entire room jumped. Victor froze, his fist raised in the air. Through the doors marched 4 MPs in full tactical gear, weapons at the low ready. And behind them walked a man with 4 silver stars on his shoulders. General Nathaniel, my commanding officer, the asset. He walked through the crowd like Moses parting the sea. He didn't look at the mayor. He didn't look at the guests. He looked straight at the stage. Victor lowered his hand slowly. General, he squeaked. Sir, thank God you're here. This man is... General Nathaniel didn't even slow down. He walked right past Victor as if he were invisible. He stopped directly in front of me. The room held its breath. The general looked at my torn uniform. He looked at my gaunt face. Then he snapped his heels together and threw up a crisp, perfect salute. Major Hunter, the general said, his voice ringing out. Apologies for the delay. Traffic was a bitch. Traffic was a bitch. The words hung in the air like smoke. I stood there, my hand still at my side, staring at General Nathaniel. He wasn't looking at me like I was a homeless drifter. He was looking at me like I was the only other soldier in the room. Victor let out a nervous laugh. It sounded like a dry twig snapping. Sir, Victor said, stepping forward with his hands up, palms open. I think there's a misunderstanding. This man, he's disturbed. He stole that uniform. He's been harassing my fiancée. The general turned his head slowly. He looked at Victor. It wasn't an angry look. It was the look a tank commander gives a speed bump. This uniform? The general pointed a gloved finger at my chest. This uniform belongs to Major Hunter, last name. And he didn't steal it. He earned it in the Karingal Valley while you were writing speeding tickets, deputy. A gasp went through the room. Lila covered her mouth. Major, someone whispered near the front. I thought he was a sergeant. He was promoted in the field, the general said, his voice projecting without a microphone. Classified operation. Which brings me to why I'm here. He signaled to the MPs. 2 of them moved to the doors, locking them. The clack-clack of the deadbolts echoed in the silence. Nobody leaves, the general said calmly. Victor's face went from pale to red. Now wait a minute. You can't lock us in here. This is a private event. I am a sworn officer of the law. And I am a federally appointed investigatory authority operating under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the general replied. And since you've been intercepting federal death benefits, deputy, you just made yourself my problem. Victor froze. He looked at Lila. Lila was backing away, shaking her head, trying to blend into the crowd of donors she had been charming all night. Lila, Victor hissed. Do something. But Lila wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me. Her eyes were wide, terrified. She saw the man she had thrown away, the man she had erased, standing next to a 4-star general. She realized, finally, that she had bet on the wrong horse. Hunter, she whispered. I didn't know. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at her. Secure the room, the general ordered. The MPs moved in. But this wasn't the arrest. This was just the containment. Major, the general said to me. You mentioned a ledger? I reached into my torn jacket. I pulled out the black book I had taken from the safe. I held it up. "It's all here, sir," I said. "Names, dates, the shell accounts they used to launder the stolen benefits, and the denial letters they hid from the widows." Victor lunged. It was a desperate, stupid move. He went for his service weapon. "Give me that book," he screamed. I didn't need the MPs. I stepped in. I caught his wrist with my left hand and drove my right elbow into his solar plexus. The air left his lungs in a wet whoosh. He doubled over. I spun him around, kicked the back of his knee, and slammed his face into the parquet floor. I twisted his arm behind his back until the shoulder joint strained. "Stay down," I whispered into his ear. The room erupted into chaos. People were screaming. The band knocked over their instruments trying to get away. "Don't shoot him," Lila screamed. "He made me do it. He said he'd hurt me if I didn't sign the papers." I looked up. Lila was standing there, tears streaming down her face. Perfect, practiced tears. She was playing the victim again. I stood up, leaving Victor groaning on the floor under the boot of an MP. I walked over to Lila. She reached out for me, her hands trembling. "Hunter, please," she sobbed. "You know me. You know I wouldn't do this. He threatened me." I looked at her hands. The same hands that had changed the locks. The same hands that had signed my death certificate while I was still fighting to get home. "I don't know you," I said quietly. "The woman I married died the day I deployed." I turned to the general. "Sir, the local sheriff is compromised. Victor has been paying him off to look the other way. We can't process this through the county." The general nodded. He pulled a radio from his belt. "This is King Actual to Sky 1. Send in the birds." A low rumble started outside. It grew louder, vibrating the crystal glasses on the tables. The sound of heavy rotors chopping the air. Blue lights flashed through the ballroom windows, not police lights. Federal lights. "We aren't using the county jail," the general said, looking at Victor. "We're taking them to Leavenworth." The doors burst open again. But this time, it wasn't MPs. It was men in suits. FBI. The silent war was over. The loud one had just begun. I stood alone in the center of the ballroom. The music had stopped. The waiters had frozen mid-step. The only movement was the swarm of federal agents moving with practiced efficiency. Victor was on the floor, handcuffed, his nose bleeding onto the parquet. He wasn't shouting anymore. He was staring at the ceiling, his eyes wide with the realization that his life was over. Lila was a different story. She wasn't in cuffs yet. She was standing near the dessert table, clutching a glass of champagne like it was a shield. Her face was a mask of pale shock, but I could see the gears turning behind her eyes. She was already calculating her next move. General Nathaniel stepped up to me. He looked at my face, the scars, the dirt, the hollow cheeks. He didn't offer pity. He offered respect. "Major," he said, his voice low, "secure the perimeter. I want you to witness the sweep. You earned it." "Yes, sir," I replied. My voice was raspy and used to speaking without fear. I walked over to where Victor was being hoisted up by two agents. He looked at me, spit bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "You think this is a win?" Victor sneered, his bravado cracking, but still there. "Lila signed everything. It's all in her name. The house, the accounts, the insurance. I was just the boyfriend. She's the mastermind. You want justice? Ask your wife where the bodies are buried." I looked at Lila. She dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor. "He's lying," she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at him. "Hunter, baby, listen to me. He forced me. He said he'd kill me if I didn't sign those papers. I saved the money for us. I was protecting it." I walked toward her. The crowd parted for me, not because I was a hero, but because I looked like Judgment Day walking in combat boots. I stopped 2 feet from her. I could smell her perfume. It was the same scent she wore the day I deployed. It used to smell like home. Now, it smelled like deception. "You protected the money?" I asked softly. "Yes." She nodded frantically, tears welling up again. "It's all in the safe. I never spent a dime of the real money. I just had to play along until you came back." I reached into my pocket, and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt I had found in the trash can outside the house days ago. "This is a receipt for a $70,000 boat," I said, holding it up. "Purchased last week. In your name. Cash." Lila's face went white. "And this," I pulled out another paper, "is the foreclosure notice on the widow Simmons' house. You bought her mortgage debt with the stolen funds and evicted her yesterday." The room gasped. The donors, the town elite, they were finally seeing the monster behind the mask. I did what I had to do to survive. Lila screamed, her voice turning shrill. "You were gone. You were dead. What was I supposed to do? Mourn forever? I deserved a life." "You deserved a life," I repeated, "but not theirs." I turned to the lead FBI agent, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper suit. "She's all yours," I said. "No," Lila screamed as the agents grabbed her arms. "Hunter, I'm your wife. You can't let them take me. We can fix this. We have money now." I watched them drag her out. She kicked and screamed, her red dress bunching up, her dignity gone. I felt nothing. No joy. No sadness. Just the quiet relief of a burden being lifted. General Nathaniel walked up beside me. He handed me a file. "This is for you," he said. I opened it. It was a deed. The deed to my house. And a check. A cashier's check for the full amount of the stolen benefits, plus interest, seized from their accounts. "The house is yours again," the general said. "And the money? Well, the government takes care of its own. We recovered everything." I looked at the check. It was enough to retire. Enough to disappear. Enough to buy a boat and sail away. I looked at the house deed. The place where I had built the flower beds. The place where I had thought I would grow old. "I don't want it," I said, closing the file. The general raised an eyebrow. "Major." "The house is poisoned," I said. "And the money, it's blood money. It belongs to the families they stole from." I handed the file back to him. "Sell the house," I said. "Give the proceeds to the Simmons family. And the rest, split it among the widows in that ledger. Every cent." The general stared at me for a long moment. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "You haven't changed, Hunter," he said. "Still trying to save everyone but yourself." "I saved myself tonight, sir," I said. "I got my name back." The general nodded. "There is one thing left, Major. Victor isn't just facing fraud charges. We found something else in his car. A burner phone. He was selling the identities of deployed soldiers to foreign buyers." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just theft. It was treason. "Where is he going?" I asked. "Black site," the general said. "He won't see a judge. He'll see a tribunal. And he'll never see the sun again." I looked at the empty doorway where they had dragged Victor out. He had called me a ghost. Now, he was the one who was going to vanish. "Good," I said. I turned to leave. The party was over. The guests were being interviewed by agents. The food was untouched. "Where will you go?" the general asked. I looked down at my torn uniform, my muddy boots. "I have a truck to find," I said. "And then, I'm going to find a new war. One that makes sense." I walked out of the ballroom, past the shocked faces of the people who had watched me get thrown out of town. I walked into the cool night air. I was homeless again, penniless again, but for the first time in years, I was free. I walked out of the hotel and didn't look back. The flashing lights of the federal convoy painted the streets in blue and red, but the silence in my head was absolute. The town that had rejected me was now awake, peering through curtains, whispering about the raid. But none of it mattered anymore. I found my truck in the impound lot. The gate was locked, but a young MP was standing guard. He saw my uniform, ragged, torn, but real, and unlocked the gate without a word. My Ford was sitting in the corner, covered in frost. The window Victor had smashed was taped up with plastic. I climbed inside. It started on the first turn, the engine rumbling like a loyal dog greeting its master. I drove to the house one last time. Not to go inside. I just parked at the end of the driveway and idled. I watched as agents carried boxes out of the front door, boxes of my life that Lila had packed away. Then I saw them bring out something else. A painting. It was a portrait Lila and I had commissioned for our first anniversary. In it, we were smiling, looking at a future that didn't exist anymore. An agent leaned it against the moving van. The wind caught it, and it fell face down into the mud. I didn't get out to pick it up. General Nathaniel's staff car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. "You sure about this, Hunter?" the general asked. "We can reinstate you. Full honors. A desk job at the Pentagon. You'd never have to be cold again." I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were still dirty, but they were steady. "I'm not built for a desk, sir," I said. "And I'm not sure I'm built for this world anymore, either." The general nodded slowly. He reached out and handed me a small envelope. "Your back pay," he said, "and a new ID. Hunter, last name, is officially retired. You're a civilian now. You can go wherever you want." I took the envelope. "Thank you, sir. One more thing," the general said, his eyes serious. "The widows. We contacted them. Mrs. Simmons, she wanted you to know she's keeping the house. She said she's going to plant hydrangeas in the front yard. Said you used to like them." A lump formed in my throat. I swallowed it down. "Tell her to use plenty of water," I said hoarsely. "They get thirsty." The general smiled. A sad, tired smile. He saluted me one last time. I returned it, sharp and clean. He drove away. I put the truck in gear. I didn't turn toward the highway. I turned toward the mountains. I wasn't going back to war, and I wasn't staying in the ruins of my marriage. I was going to find a place where the air was clean, where words meant something, and where loyalty wasn't just a line on a Hallmark card. As I drove past the "Welcome to our town" sign, I saw a man walking on the shoulder of the road. He looked homeless, heavy pack, tired walk. I pulled over. I rolled down the window. "Need a lift?" I asked. The man looked up. He had the same 1,000-yard stare I saw in the mirror every morning. "A vet. Just going north," the man said. "Hop in," I said. "I'm going that way too." He climbed in. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. I drove into the sunrise, leaving the shadows behind. I had lost my wife. I had lost my home. But looking at the road ahead, for the first time in a long time, I felt found. The end. Hit the brakes for a second. I have a question for you. That was the story of Hunter, a man who lost everything but kept his honor. My question to you is this. If you were Hunter, would you have taken the money and the house back, or would you have walked away like he did? Be honest. I want to know what real justice looks like to you. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Shout out your city or country in the comments below. If this story moved you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It helps us bring more of these hidden heroes to light. And tell me in the comments, what kind of stories do you want to hear next? More military revenge, family betrayal, or maybe something with a darker mystery? Let me know, and I'll write it for you. Until the next thriller, stay safe, stay loyal. See you soon.